Spoilers ahead for The Lord of the Rings. Hey everybody, welcome once again to the second episode of Screenwriters Rewatch The Lord of the Rings. This week's all about Lord of the Rings here at the Script Department. We'll be delving into all three films over the 3 days in the middle of the week and giving you our take on whether they deserve a place in filmmaking history and, more importantly, in the grass-covered hobbit hole that we call the Script Department vaults. But before we get into all of that, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, have a look at the previous episodes. As I say, we're doing Lord of the Rings stuff all this week, so keep an eye out for that stuff. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts is where you will find us. So today, Brad and Caleb, we are here to take the hobbits to Isengard with film number 2 of Peter Jackson. It's a cheap line, that, isn't it? That was an easy win for that intro, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is Peter Jackson's number 2 in the trilogy. So obviously we are looking at the Two Towers. So we know from yesterday, the Fellowship of the Ring is a big deal to you and I, and to a lesser extent, John. But I know for a fact, Caleb, this is quite a special one for you. So I'm going to go straight to you and say, what are you bringing to the table with?
Oh man,
what are you bringing to the table? Tell us. Give us your baggage.
Right, a little anecdote. Okay, so the Fellowship trailer came out. I was like 7, or I was probably 6 whenever the trailer came out, and I was actually scared from the trailer. I was like, I don't want to go see that. That looks scary. Even though at the time I was like 6 and had seen Starship Troopers and was horrified. So saw Fellowship, loved it, like blew my mind. I was in 2nd grade when this came out, and so the night before it came out, I remember watching one of the late night shows, and they played a scene which happened to be the warg scene, the warg fight,
nice.
The warg riders. And I was like, oh man, I cannot wait. And so the reason this is such a vivid memory is because the next day we went and saw it in theaters. My parents came and got me and pulled me out of school early, and I was like, I'm going to see Two Towers. So it was just such a fun experience because, coming off of the height of the first one, going into this, where this one really opens up and does a lot of world building and huge fights, probably the biggest cinematic thing I had ever seen, or a lot of people at the time. And so but there was just so much emotion going through it, even how dark and affected by a lot of the tone of this movie I was of how it affected me. Seeing Helms Deep and seeing the kids being handed the shields and the sword, and just being like, that's me. I was so terrified, but at the same time loving it. And the fact that you don't see those kids after the fight is there for a reason. So because otherwise you would have seen them. Came out of the movie, and it was nighttime, of course, because it was so long. But that's why I just remember getting pulled out of school to go see this, and the anticipation and walking out of this movie. It was just something that has never happened the same way. So
that's some great baggage.
Nice.
Man. That is some great baggage.
Yeah, right.
That you're bringing along there. I love it. How about you, Brad? What are you bringing?
So I saw Fellowship on DVD. I missed that at the cinema. I was brought up on Tolkien. My dad read me The Hobbit and tried to read me Lord of the Rings, but it's hard to read to a child. They fall asleep and stuff, like I did. And then I remember watching the animated Lord of the Rings, which blew me away. It was up there with Watership Down, kind of effects it had on me. I was really affected by it. And then when Fellowship came out, I was 19, I think, tiny bit older than Caleb, but I was I watched it only marginally little bit. But I watched that on DVD, and I kind of missed it coming out, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I forgot this. And I think I watched it. I think it was I was working nights at a restaurant, and I think it was at midnight we started it, so it was like quite a slog to get
wow.
through at that time in the evening. So I felt like I'd really achieved something. So when Two Towers was coming out, I was really psyched for it. I was like, great. And I went to like this huge multiplex with my friends, like where I grew up, and it was really big cinema in a tiny little town. So we had all these screens, and we were like, yeah, we're definitely going to see it. And they put it on screen one, and it was huge, and yeah, just the battles in it. And I'd read so much about it and surfed a little bit, but you can't, the internet wasn't as good as it is now in 2001 or 2002. But there were a few people on there talking about stuff. You could get some kind of the patter that we get now when you're trying to learn more about films, how they were made, and the who's going to be in them, and all the kind of hype that goes with it. So I'd done quite a bit of that, and I'd learned a lot about the way the battle scenes were going to be made, and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be big. This is going to be a big film, and it's I loved it. It was a big film for me in my early 20s.
And I think it lives up to it as well, doesn't it? Like for me, I came to this on DVD as well. I missed the I was too young. I think I was either too young to see it, or I probably could have seen it, but I think my mum at the time was like, no, not good to go and see it. It's far too violent for you, and in a very English way. And so I missed it, but I managed to get the DVD, and I went straight to the extended cut. So I only saw the theatrical cut way later in adulthood, just because it was the only one I could get my hands on. And so I was horrified by some of the scenes that were, to my mind, cut from the film. Of course, they weren't cut; they were added back in. But to my mind, they were cut, and I was thinking, "What the bloody hell is going on here?" So it was a film that, for me, it was always a film that was getting to the next one. And I don't mean that I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. It's act two. It's act two of the thing. It's where a lot of stuff happens. And having said that, Helms Deep is still one of the best things I've ever seen. It's amazing. Like, and the attention to detail of it, the armor, the kind of, stomping of the spears going up and down and things like that. It's an extraordinary thing. And I always remember, and this is the thing I remember coming out of this, watching for the first time, thinking, was the sound of the rain on the armor in that sequence. And I'd never heard, because why would you have ever heard something like that before? And I remember thinking, wow, that's amazing. And it just I remember being in it. I was in the film, and you felt like you were in the middle of this. And, like Legolas's bow in the rain, and he lets it go, and the water springs off it because it's real. And it felt so tangible, and so, yeah, it was extraordinary and somehow grounded again. We said this about the Fellowship. It's grounded. So yeah, I'm a bit cooler on it, but I still love it very, very deeply, as I do with all of these films. What is it for you, Caleb? Do you think that if we're putting our professional hats on and we're going right, okay, a filmmakers now, let's do this. What is it? What is it? Do you think makes it stand the test of time for you? Why do you keep going back to it?
Man, of course, Helms Deep. Like, let's get that out of the way. Like, Helms Deep is such a great scene and first battle and precursor to the next film where we get more of that scale. I will say, watching this critically, like through to like today, it, I think, is probably the one that ages the most, as far as even some of the techniques, the special effects techniques that they use. They're compared to the first one, like there's some stuff that's like practical effects that, is like shots painted over each other, where it looks, you can tell that there's something like off about it, but it still has that artistry of practical effects to where you can be okay with it because it's, how movies were done. And so, but this one has some of those not so pretty, like aged effects where the one that I'd noticed this time, and I think I've always kind of noticed it, but like when Gandalf takes off his robe to reveal he's white now to Theoden, like you can see the massive light just like fade in on him, like from, you know, just off camera. So like there's some stuff like that, you know, that's from a filmmaking standpoint, definitely ages, but you know, it's still done with care. So it's not, you know, a cynical person making a movie that's, you know, just trying to cut corners and make money. It still has that care. But so so I would definitely say that this one critically doesn't hold up as much as the other ones for me. I would say it's probably the weakest, I'm assuming that's what you were saying, but
it is, yeah.
But yeah, so I think I definitely agree that from the story point, it is the one that gets us to the third for sure. But
that's what a second act's for, though, isn't it? You know, that's exactly, kind of that's what you do. Yeah. You have the adventure and everything. It's all there, but it's getting us from the setting out on the adventure to coming home again. And that's what the second act's for. So when I say that, to be clear, it's not a criticism in any way of it, because I think it's a very well made second act, I think.
Yeah. And like probably the strongest point of this movie, just from a writing standpoint, is in my opinion, is Sam's monologue in the end, where it's kind of like, you know, wrapping up the story. And this movie does more than Fellowship, and we'll see with Return of the King, but this movie feels like more like a Hollywood movie, like a big budget Hollywood movie from that era. And that the monologue definitely reflects that. I think it's, you know, it's not a art house film, you know, like we're expecting. And you know, even the structure of Lord of the Rings, you know, it's a very classical story. So sure. You're not so you're not going to get that. But Sam's monologue is just, it's so well written, because it could be cheesy, and some people might think it's cheesy, but you know, the way it's delivered and given everything else surrounding it, it really is a strong point, and very relevant.
Yeah. So relevant.
I remember watching it at the start of COVID, and just, you know, that scene hitting again. And so, yeah, like you can definitely feel a lot of that, coming from the books and a man writing it during the war, and and it's true to life, you know. So
for sure, it's interesting you mentioned that particular point. I got to see the extended cut at the cinema about 6 months ago. They did a run of them near me at one of the local cinemas, and that scene, we were talking about Moonlight 5 last week, and I was saying, you know, got me crying, so it's got to be good, and I did. I started, you know, got me good. I welled up well and truly, and I think there's definitely an argument to be made that it's certainly not subtle, but you know, and there is an argument to be made that it could be cheesy. But then none of these films aren't really for subtlety. They're not really for that kind of thing. They're hitting these big emotional beats, and they're done with a skillful hand, and it works for me, for sure. What about you, Brad? What do you find yourself revisiting this with dewy eyes?
Big time. I mean, I know it's definitely the weakest of the three, but it doesn't feel like it is. It's definitely the film that gets us to the end, but it doesn't feel like it is. Like the peril and the emotion associated with that in this film is so strong. It's so palpable. Like when Aragorn falls, you know he's going to come back, right? But they don't, and you believe they're grieving him, and you feel that. And it's. I've seen many medieval film and TV show, and there's something different about this trilogy, and there's something different about Two Towers. I think, like, there's something when they're getting ready for Hardhome. They're not Hardhome.
Helms Deep.
Helms
Harder.
Deep. I was about to compare it to Game of Thrones Hardhome, but so
Gotcha.
so
I understand
the bit
the
where they're
point, yeah.
preparing in Helms Deep, and they think they're going to die. They you can see them chatting. They're getting their armor on, and they know. They're like, well, if we're going to die here, then let's die here. And there's a similar thing in Game of Thrones and Helms Deep, Hardhome, yeah, where it's a very similar thing, and that is again a mid-story epic battle, and the later battles in both of these franchises are almost the same thing on steroids. So Minas Tirith is basically a really, really big version of the battle we get in this film, and I felt more peril in Helm's Deep than I did in Minas Tirith.
I totally
because
agree.
you've already seen them overcome tremendous numbers and survive, and everyone survives, and they do a good job of it, and they win. And then there's one that's a lot bigger, granted, but it's a similar kind of scenario. So I'm not saying that, Return of the King is a fucking masterpiece, but it is Two Towers on steroids. Like, there are a lot of things that we see again, and that's why I have such a strong place for Two Towers in my heart. It's like such a good film. Everything in it, the attention to detail is spectacular. Even the little cameo of Peter Jackson on the ramparts is like, oh, there he is, oh, he's gone. All of that kind of stuff. It's brilliant. I love nerding out over it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's and that peril is reflected in, I ask myself as I'm watching it, okay, is this a production standpoint or is this intentional? There's like 10 guys like left whenever they're boarding up the doors. like everyone has died. There's no elves. We don't see any of the elves. Like, they're all gone. They got left behind. So yeah, like there is that sense of like bleakness to Helm's Deep, that even though both of them suffer from the Deus Ex Machina of of the armies coming in and saving the day, this one has a little bit more bleakness to me. And it's again like the having the children fight, like desperate times, like the kids standing on the walls, like and again not seeing them after the fight.
I'd never considered that, the not seeing them after the fight bit. It's never something that crossed my mind before, and that is actually so devastating.
Yeah,
that you don't see them after the fight. There's that it's all distilled in that lovely moment with Aragorn and the kid, isn't it? This is a good sword. We got to. I don't know why he sounded like Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is a good sword, young master. But yeah, this is a good sword, and it's that moment of hopelessness and him snapping at Legolas. I shall die as one of them. It's a great character moment for Aragorn, and you see him really begin to become the king who will return in the next film. And you see Legolas. I was quite hard on Legolas in the Fellowship of the Ring in yesterday's chat, but you see him here, and you see him grow as a character. You see him do something. He's given something to do in this one. And you mentioned earlier on, when Aragorn goes over the edge, Orlando Bloom in that moment there, he's looking down, and Theoden says, "Leave the dead," and he looks at him like, "Kidding me? Like, I'm not leaving him." And he's an elf. He's watching him come to terms with the idea of his brother in arms being lost and having died. It's quite profound, I think.
The dynamic of the elves dealing with mortality in this film is spectacular.
Yeah,
like the elf death. I think you see it through the eyes of the elf general.
Yeah, yes.
And the idea that these guys are eternal, effectively, and this one you're seeing from POV, him being extinguished. He could have walked the Middle Earth for thousands of years, and this is the end. And it's like, oh my goodness, that was weighty to see that happen, because he came in here on his white horse, like ready to save the day, and he got slain brutally, like horrifically slain.
Yeah.
Not an honourable way to go down.
Yeah.
And that's it. He's gone. And
Yeah.
it was like the whole dynamic of putting the elves in, I guess the mortal worry of men, in a way that you're going to see, you're going to feel like a man in this battle rather than an elf, because you can die and you have to face up to the fact that your eternal life may be extinguished if you don't fight.
Yeah. And to the choice of cutting into a POV of him dying, and the last thing he sees is his men dead. There's just so much imagery that I feel like is captured, that Peter Jackson wanted to capture from Tolkien, like in the books, that translates so perfectly, since this is a visual medium. So
absolutely, and it's interesting. I'm talking about adaptation a little bit later in the week, but I want to touch on it a little bit here, because as far as I know, the elves were not at Helms Deep in the book. This was an addition by Peter Jackson that is just totally, coming from him making a film. And we spoke about it yesterday with John, the idea that they made a film first and they made a Lord of the Rings film second. They're making a movie first, they're making a story first, and I think that's the lesson from these films, I think. And I think it's why they endure so well, is because they were focused on that primarily. And I think the mortality of elves in that moment does add gravitas to that sequence, and it also, the fact that Theoden believes there's no one coming, we have no friends, and yet here they are, and they are willing to to do that. I think it's interesting. I think it also subverts the idea, the Deus Ex Machina idea, because you do think, and again, it's difficult to remember. I don't remember seeing this for the first time. I can't remember what I thought was going to happen, because it's so long ago. We said this yesterday, but like it's difficult to say. But I feel like them marching in. Yes, we know Gandalf's coming, but that was a long time ago. Maybe we've forgotten about that by this point. And they march in. You kind of go, oh, here's the army come to save them. And so by the time we get to the death of the elf general, I can't remember his name, Halte, something like that, isn't it? The elf general. By the time we get to his death, Haldir, thank you. Yeah. By the time we get to him and his POV shot, perhaps we don't think there's an army coming. Perhaps we think this is it. And maybe we think, maybe our heroes might escape, but Rohan's fallen. It's a great bit of filmmaking.
It's gloomy. It's so really gloomy.
And I think that like with maybe Lord of the Rings overall, as a story, it's a very typical story. Like you know how it's going to end, in to whatever degree. It's Harry Potter. You know how that's going to end somewhat, and that's not what makes it powerful. It's the weight of what these characters lose and gain through the journey that is what's important, because it's not a new art house movie where we're going to surprise you because it's going to be a totally groundbreaking story that subverts all expectation. That's not how these movies or a lot of classical stories are. And so that's where Peter Jackson and everyone else who worked on it, who wrote it. And that's where they really did well, is knowing where to pull those strings of, like, here's where we give the audience a break. There's a lot of problems that I have with current movies that don't know how to do that. It's all about the bleakness of just hammering your audience and making them feel terrible by the end of the movie. Whereas this has such a great balance of, childlike wonder and the bleakness of war and all these themes, and it knows when to press the gas and when to press the brake. So yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I think you're right for the for every elf general death, you need a Treebeard smashing up Isengard. Like you've got to have that balance, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you got
It's even in the music. Like the music, it's all just orchestrated, directed. It's clearly like intentional. So
yeah, for sure. And it's those moments. Gimli is used to such brilliant effect in this film. The and Legolas and Gimli kind of counting the dead. How much counting the dead? That sounds far more grim than it is. Counting as they are. Well, yeah, killing. Maybe it is grim, but the way they do that, the way there is levity to it, and then would you like me to describe it to you, or shall I get you a box? It's great, and it has those moments, and perfectly in amongst this terrible destruction. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, just real quick, like even on that like that's juxtaposed with the image of the old man and the young kid who Aragorn talks to, like that, like cutting to them, and the old man's the one who lets go of the arrow, and like because he can't hold on, I assume. Like so, yeah, just knowing that, like making those editing choices, it's all great.
So great. So I want to talk about Frodo and Sam, because this for me is the part where the film it doesn't work so well. And it's interesting because John made way back in the very, very early days of the script department, he made a very great video talking about their arc in terms of B stories and things like that. And go check it out. It's still on the channel still. It's there to be seen. But I think this is where it falls down, because I find myself when I watch this film going, okay, yeah, they're still walking. Yeah, Gollum looks great still, but yeah, still walking. Yeah, where's Aragorn? Where's Treebeard? Where's Gandalf? Let's get back to all of this stuff. And I don't think, and I've been doing a bit soul searching about this today, because I'm trying because it bothers me. It bothers me that I feel like that, and I'm trying to reconcile that feeling with the profession I'm now in. And I think I figured it out, and I think it's that for me that it's the character development with all of the others apart from Frodo, Sam, and Gollum. Actually, no, Gollum does, to be fair, but you have this wonderful, great sweeping character development. Legolas, Aragorn, they come on a long way, and they grow and they change and things like that. Whereas Frodo and Sam, I feel as though, broadly speaking, they're left in pretty much the same place that we start them. Frodo just a little bit more tired and a little bit more sick of it, and that's oversimplifying it, and I'm being kind of a bit hyperbolic about that. But I do think that for me is what it is kind of where I fall down with that. Do you agree, or am I just thinking I want more action?
I think it's the slower. It is the slower film of the three, particularly at certain points. I mean, I think the stuff with the Ents is quite slow as well, but that's that's an intention. That's an intentional thing. They're slow things, right? But I think the choice to have Sam and Frodo locked in this sort of purgatorial struggle is because that's what it is, and I think they were trying to make you feel that that the whole when they're eating lambus bread, you expect it to be like dry soda bread. You just, do you know what I mean? Like everything about what they're going through is uncomfortable. It doesn't feel great. They're not having fun. They're falling out. They're, he's slowly. You learn that he's slowly being eaten away by the ring, and it's. I think we're meant to feel uncomfortable with that, which is why it's not easy. It's not an easy part to watch, but it is slow. But I think that's probably the reason the reason why.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Like I think it does lack a little bit of, I don't know if depth is the right word, but it almost feels like there could be more. But I agree with it being, it's we kind of have to see them walking to set up or the journey. To me, it's a little nihilistic, like they're just walking, and they come upon Faramir, and so I think that I feel like it's a little more about how in this moment them as characters affect everything around them, like the story that's going on around them. So Faramir and Gollum, or Smeagol, and so like if you look at the Fellowship and even this one, there are these characters that they bring to the forefront. It's like Legolas falls behind in the first one, like we were talking about. And I feel like Sam and Frodo kind of do that in this movie, to where it's like, okay, they're still there. They're still doing their thing, but we're not going to put them in the spotlight, really, even though we'll see, scenes of them. Really on this watch through, for me, it was seeing Smeagol, and especially in like the extended cut, seeing and understanding a little bit more about his development and his inner struggle. However much of that is true to that we get. But like, I feel like that's a little bit more of what I take away from those scenes.
Yeah.
So
I know, I agree.
But I would agree that they're not perfect.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I think that the Smeagol, Gollum, Andy Serkis shines so brightly through this, and that that's not a hot take. It's it is but it is the thing that kind of jumps out to me always when he's on screen. Somehow the performance through all of that, groundbreaking, but kind of slightly a little bit rough looking CGI at this point in time. We're 20 years later now, and I think it's okay to say that as great as it does still look, you can see, when I was watching it 15, 20 years ago, I was looking at it thinking, wow, this is a real character. And now I think you can kind of look at that and go, okay, clearly it's not. And that's not a criticism. That's just age. That's just how it works.
Age.
Yeah, exactly. It's just age technology. But yet he shines. He comes through everything, and the duality performance there. And again, we've been covering Moon Knight. I think actually maybe Moon Knight and the Oscar Isaacs performance probably owes a little bit of this to the Gollum Smeagol dynamic, because there is a bit of that going on there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a masterclass from Serkis, isn't it? I mean, it's just so good. I mean, if it wasn't motion capture and animation and what it was, his performance was like Oscar worthy. Like it was brilliant, and it was his face as well. He wasn't just voicing an animated character, and it's just that in a weird space to be up for best actor, Gollum. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's technically be best supporting actor, wouldn't he? But yeah, it's a masterclass from Serkis. I think it's amazing
for sure. I mean, these as much as I'm cooler on it, it is just such a great. It's just a joy to go back to. It's one of these films that it's a series that's a joy to go back to. It's one of the reasons we're covering it, extensively this week, because it is just such a great experience to go back and watch these films. But one of the things that stuck out to me this time round, on this rewatch, was the way masculinity is portrayed in these films, and the beautiful, lovely sort of delicacy and deftness and gentility to it that masculinity is shown. And I saw a meme earlier on. I'm going to reference a meme because I'm a millennial. Damn it! And it was saying, oh, that I'm in my therapist's office, and I'm saying I don't want to rely on my friends. And he looks up at a big poster at Aragorn and says, "Do you think Aragorn, son of Arathorn, is weak? He relied on his friends." You go, okay, I'm sorry. And I love it because it's like that. He is in every sense the epitome of a masculine bloke. He's got a great beard, he's got a sword, he's a great, he's got power, he's, all this, that, and the other. And yet he is so gentle with his friends. And that lovely moment with between Aragorn and Legolas when Legolas returns Arwen's necklace. It's so beautiful, it's so touching, and there's so much of that going on here, and I think it's quite ahead of its time in terms of the way it represents masculinity, and quite beautiful, quite touching, I think.
Yeah, I think the way that Mortensen plays him is, everyone has a part they were born to play, and this was his. Like, he's done some amazing parts, but this was literally the role for him. Like the intricacies of emotion that he conveys with just the slightest little look. Like, there's a couple of times he looks at the hobbits before he runs into battle, and just there's love. It's love on his face, and respect. Like, just in 1, 2 or 3 second look, and then bloodlust, and he's off for battle. And it's just like, okay, right, this is not your sort of drum beating Vikings at sea sort of historical thing that we're watching here. It goes beyond that, and I think that's why the trilogy worked so well. I mean, obviously the subject matter was the film that could never be made. That was why there was 3 of them, because it was too long. But he did it. He did it. Like, he was a long time coming as well. Like, he worked his way up, doing some amazing things with film and blood and guts and things, as he did in his earlier days. But all of it was groundbreaking, and it was almost like Jackson was probably the only person who was ever going to do this. And it was, again, another perfect storm of things that made it happen.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a stunning thing. If we can take lessons for writers from this, if we're looking at this as screenwriters and we go, what can we learn from this? What would yours be? I think I know what mine is, but what do you think yours is? Open question.
I think, I guess for me, it's the patience shown in this film. It is the slower one, and we are on a journey to get to to Gondor. Like, it is, or to all of the places in Return of the King. Really, we the journey is to get there, and I think it's really well paced, because they could have gone all out battle. There could have been a lot more fighting and a lot more sort of aggression from Isengard as well, and it is well paced, and it doesn't affect the finale in the third film too much, which is good. The thing that you do take to the final film is the emotion from the first one and the sort of character development that's built in, and I think that comes from really patient writing and not just like letting both barrels go in the middle of the story.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I think for me, it's it comes back to the keeping your audience in mind, and not just being like, oh, well, I want to subvert expectation or just keep hammering that. You need to know, again, when, like, to play those moments and notes right, and feel that out, and use juxtaposition, because your audience, if you do it well, your audience doesn't know, but they can feel it. It's the invisible art of of movie making. It's in editing, it's in writing, it's in directing, and so, like, using that as a way of thinking as I'm writing is something that I try to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's pretty much what I was going to say as well, Caleb. It's the respecting your audience and respecting the intelligence of the audience and finding interesting ways of doing it, but also just acknowledging the fact that sometimes there's a great story, like, there's a lot of elements of the hero's journey knocking around in the Lord of the Rings, and it's a great example of that. Just a bit, yeah. And yeah, cool. Why change that? It works. It works. And so respect the audience and know that they know that things are probably going to be all right, and lean into the fact that it's actually about the journey, and it's about the trip, and I think these are just great. They are great films to watch and check out if you are a new screenwriter in the world, and if you're an old screenwriter.
Yeah.
If you're an old screenwriter,
Yeah.
then you know them by heart anyway. But that's the.
And I think there's also another. This might not be as much of a writing, but there's an interesting thing to look at within the theatrical editions and then the extended editions. So like this one to me feels like the one that doesn't need the extended as much. There's of course scenes that I think would need to be in there, but a lot of what was cut feels like foreshadowing, almost to where I think that you should anyone watching it for the first time should watch the theatrical first, experience it all that way, and then come back to the extended, which is how if like the way that I watched them, theatrical cuts were the first thing I saw. And funny enough, we only had Fellowship extended for many years. So that was the only one that I watched that was extended for a while. And there's a funny story there with Return of the King that we'll get into on the next episode. But
exciting.
Yeah, no, it's hilarious. And so with this one, like there's a lot of Gandalf, like he feels like he falls into the trap of exposition a lot, like, and they even kind of nod to that where it's like, oh, you speak in riddles, and it's like, yeah, but to us we can kind of like, they're not too riddly
figure them out.
So so that was definitely something that like especially on this watch through was like, okay, like, yeah, that's kind of, that beat's been hit multiple times, foreshadowing a lot of stuff. So it does feel like a lot of this with the extended cut is meant to be a second viewing, and that's what I find really interesting about those, is that they can exist on their own, but you can still get more out of viewing it a second time through the extended cuts. So
yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting how after doing a few of these now and watching multiple films with different versions and things like that, you've got the Blade Runners out there, you've got the Star Warses and the Lord of the Rings, is how different an experience it can be watching the different versions of these films. And like I said at the beginning, I came to certainly the Two Towers. I came to to the extended cut first, and so it's difficult for me to, because it was interesting hearing that, because it's difficult for me to separate, because that's the original for me. The theatrical cut is like this weird cut down version, and it's quite it's a strange experience. So I will, next time I watch it, I'll keep those words in mind and kind of see what jumps out. Final thoughts, gents, if there are any.
It's up there of the original trilogy. It's definitely in the top 3 for me. I don't know whereabouts. It's somewhere in the top 3. But I love.
Great.
I love this film. I parts of it I feel are the best in the trilogy, and there are parts that I feel are the weakest. And I don't know. I at the time I watched it, I thought that was going to be my favorite. It maybe not as I've got older, but at the time when I watched it, it was my favorite Lord of the Rings, and it's always going to hold a special place in my heart, I think.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think watching through, I'm trying to keep myself as pure as possible on this watch through. I'm watching each one as we do each episode, so I can try to be as unbiased as possible. But I think this is my favorite personally. I don't think it's the best, especially on this watch through. Like Fellowship was a lot stronger than I've ever felt watching through these. So I'm excited to see Return of the King again. But yeah, like this again, there's Helms Deep, even down to the architecture of Helms Deep. I bought the Lego of Helms Deep.
Oh,
I have
nice.
I have the Tower of
Those are-
Orthanc.
Very
It's a good Lego kit.
Right? It's amazing. I built it while watching Lord of the Rings.
Oh, wow.
So
That's a very pure evening. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. That was the height of my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I think I would say it's definitely the weakest, but I tend to just think of them all as one movie together. I even said that I watched them. I tried to watch them back to back any chance that I get. So
yeah, I'm with you guys. It's the weaker one for me, but it also has Helms Deep in it. So that that's it. And I'm excited to watch Return of the King, because I think Return of the King is my favorite, though I think The Fellowship is a stronger film. So I'm quite interested to watch it with that hat on and see where we fall. Watch the many endings of Return of the King. So it should be good. Thank you so much, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. We will be back tomorrow with Screenwriters Rewatch The Return of the King. But until then, if you haven't seen The Fellowship, it's just before this, yesterday. Go check it out. And we've got some more Lord of the Rings stuff coming up. So it's a good time for Tolkien fans over here. So until tomorrow, as it turns out, we'll see you later. Thanks very much. Goodbye.